A list of mania. Think less but see it grow.
Hello everybody, it's the Lawn Gnome and welcome to your June 2019 episode of 10 for 12. If you're new to my channel, first of all, let me say welcome, it's a pleasure to have you. And for all of you returning, I think you're going to really appreciate this new episode. But before we begin, I just want to say that at a last minute effort, I had to unfortunately switch my collaborators. The person who was supposed to be joining me is a fantastic member of the YouTube film reviews community named The Movie Oracle. I will have a link to her channel down below. She unfortunately wasn't able to go through with this because she just couldn't seem to find the amount of stuff that she needed for this specific episode. But in a last minute, I got Melissa from the Bookish Babbler, who has worked with me so many times before, was just on my channel for my new Sunday sit down. You should definitely check both of these ladies out because they are both fantastic. And the topic of today is your 10 favorite TV show series finales. I decided to do this because of the fact that this year we said goodbye to two of the most popular shows in television, Game of Thrones and The Big Bang Theory, some for better and some for worse. But it made me think back to some of those truly great series finales that I have actually seen. And lo and behold, I actually did manage to get my hands on 10 of them, and some of them I actually did see when they aired, and some I actually saw in syndication, just because I wasn't really interested in that show as much as I was today. But also, some of those shows I wasn't even watching because I didn't even have the means to even watch them. But we're going to get into all 10 of them. They're very interesting, and one of the most important things is I'm going to be able to give you guys a little bit of an understanding as to why I think that these series finales are so great. But I've got my list right here, and I'm very excited, so let's begin. Number 10 is the final episode of News Radio. I didn't watch this show when it aired, but I watched a lot of it in syndication. It was one of the hidden gems that NBC had to offer. Such an amazing, diverse cast of different comedians. Some of them were not known at the time, but now they're all famous faces. We've got everybody from Andy Dick to Dave Foley to Moira Tierney to Joe Rogan, and of course the late Phil Hartman. This was a very heartwarming ending because it was actually very interesting to see how this show would end, because unfortunately after season 4, Phil Hartman passed away due to unforeseen circumstances. It was very heartbreaking, and they replaced him with John Lovitz, and the ratings just didn't really go anywhere, and the show is pretty much on its last leg. But it's also very hard to replace someone when you know that you cannot get that kind of comedy style back unless you really, really search hard, and when it comes to making a television show, it's just not a lot of time. But it was a very heartwarming thing to see this entire group really show that they were not just people who worked together, they were a family, they were a bit out of their minds, but at the end of the day, it was what made them such a tight-knit group of co-workers and family. And I would highly recommend watch the entire series of News Radio. I'm really excited because I'm going to be rewatching it again after I finish rewatching Seinfeld. I actually have News Radio on DVD. Very excited to revisit that show again because it really is one of the smartest comedies ever on television. Number 9 is The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I didn't start watching that show when it first aired, but I did watch the last season live on NBC. Thank God for syndication. I got to see what that show was all about, and of course, who doesn't love anything that Will Smith does? So this was one of the most surprisingly heartwarming endings that I ever saw, because the whole story was about how Will left Philadelphia and moved to Bel-Air to be in a safer place, and at the end of this episode and the end of the series, the entire Banks family is leaving to go back to the East Coast. But Will has established himself and has changed his life in so many ways. He doesn't feel the need to leave, and he wants to stay in Bel-Air because he knows that there's good stuff here. And the very last moment of that episode is when he's staring at the empty hallway of the Banks house and just remembering all of these great things and the fact that thanks to them he had become a better person, and he's looking forward to the next step in life in Bel-Air. Number 8 is a very short-lived show, unfortunately, and it is the animated series of Green Lantern. It was the first CGI Bruce Timm-produced animated series, so if you've been a fan of Batman, the animated series, Superman, Justice League, what have you, this one was really cool. It was such a cool show to finally see Green Lantern as the head role Hal Jordan, of course, but we also got so much fan service as Green Lantern fans, like various other Lantern Corps, as well as other human Green Lanterns, also seeing Sinestro as a Green Lantern, even though we all know what he is to become, and there was just so much depth and so much great character development, and the stories were great too. It got off to a bit of a shaky start, but at the end, we got such a beautiful ending, but upsettingly, also a possible cliffhanger, because unfortunately that show got canceled along with Young Justice, not because of the fact that they got poor ratings. For some strange reason, Cartoon Network and Warner Brothers just had some stupid ideas in their minds, and they made some really bad decisions, and obviously, these days, when you take a look at Cartoon Network, the proof is in the pudding, and it was just such a great show. I wish they could have continued it. I mean, I am glad to know that Young Justice is continuing, but I really would like to see that show continue as well, because it was such a deep one, and if you are a Green Lantern fan, you will love it. Number 7 is probably a show you may not have even thought that I would consider talking about. The final episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation. So of course I had to catch up because it aired when I was very young, but I did manage to catch the last 2 to 3 seasons on live television. I loved the fact that it was on a Saturday night, so I had the ability to watch it, but then it did move to weekdays, so it was a little bit tougher for me to watch it religiously. But when I found out that the show was coming to an end, I knew I had to find some way to watch it. It was a 2-hour-long series finale. The cast did an incredible job. The story was one of the most epic stories that I ever saw in the world of Star Trek, and it also involved my favorite science fiction topic, one of them at least. Besides alternate universes, I'm also such a huge fan of time travel because they are so interwoven, and you got to see Captain Picard traveling from the past to the present to the future, trying to understand why he's doing so and what the main problem is that's causing him to make all these time shifts. And after this whole epic story finishes, it ends on such a wonderful, happy note where he basically realizes that his crew is everything to him, and if it wasn't for them, he probably wouldn't have survived this crazy adventure. And the last moment is just him joining the crew for a poker game, and he just says a very nice little thing at the end. He says, "I should have done this a long time ago," and then he just deals the cards to the whole main crew. And it was just nice to see them all sitting around in a circle, just enjoying each other's company, and then you see the Enterprise just go off into the distance with the classic Star Trek theme song. Such a wonderful way to end that show. I think it may be the best series finale of any Star Trek show. Number 6 is Superman the Animated Series. Yes, I'm happy to actually have animated series in these because cartoons can be worthy of great series finales, and Superman the Animated Series, its last season was one of the darkest animated shows I ever saw, and the last episode was not necessarily an ending, rather it was a continuation, or you could perceive what you think it might actually be. But the last episode of the Superman the Animated Series was Superman returning to Earth, brainwashed by Darkseid, and almost destroying the Earth. And when he finally realizes that he is under the brainwashing influence of Darkseid, he comes at Darkseid with everything he's got, and now the question remains, are the people of Metropolis, or even the people of the world, going to trust him anymore? And the last scene in that episode is Superman and Lois Lane just standing on top of a building, giving each other a long, hard hug, because they're both just uncertain about the future. But luckily, while that show did come to an end, we did get Justice League, and the best part about Justice League and Justice League Unlimited was the fact that the storyline from Batman and Superman continued on through this, and even Batman Beyond was interwoven into that storyline as well. It was such an amazing and different way to end an animated series, and I also felt that this really showed people that animation can do bigger and better things rather than just entertaining children. Number 5 is The Wonder Years. If you have never seen The Wonder Years, you really should. It is one of the most beautifully well-written shows of all time. Of course, introducing us to Danica McKellar, as well as the great Fred Savage. And Fred Savage just gives us a beautiful embodiment of innocence and being a kid, coming of age, and just trying to accept life for what it is, even though there are times when you don't want things to change. The last episode shows that in full force when he realizes that even though he has loved Winnie Cooper ever since he was a little kid, and we saw that first kiss in their first episode, he finally understands that life is unpredictable, things can always change, and even if you try so hard to keep things the same, they're going to change anyway, whether you like it or not. And there was a beautiful epilogue of the inner monologue of Kevin that has been there since the very beginning of the series, just telling us what exactly happened. And the fact that even though the ending that the fans would have loved to see between these two star-crossed lovers in Kevin and Winnie, we may not have gotten that ending that we all truly wanted, but we got something that was just as special and just as important, and it really made us a little bit more wiser when that show officially came to a close. Definitely check out The Wonder Years. It is such a beautiful, beautiful show. Number 4 is one of the more recent series finales from 2019, and I have to admit I'm glad that it's here, because it would have sucked if this one ended up not being what I wanted, and it's the series finale of The Big Bang Theory. The Big Bang Theory was such an important piece of my life in my 20s, because in 2007 I was part of a focus group that watched the pilot and said, please put this show on the air. It was something different. It showed pop culture, geek culture, in a way that we had never seen on television before, and these characters really were people that we just invited into our homes and just loved to death. We quoted them, we acted like them. They really became a television staple. So to see this show come to an end, we were wondering what kind of an ending we were going to get, and let me say, we got one of the most heartwarming, genuine endings from this show, and it's going to go down as one of the most beloved shows of all time. I mean, the Friends finale got a great reception. Seinfeld was somewhere in the middle, but The Big Bang Theory was universally loved, universally respected, and I'm just so happy that this show lasted for as long as it did. I loved this show so much. I own it all on DVD, except for the newest season, but I know that when the final season officially comes out on DVD, I'm gonna buy it, and I'm really excited to watch this show from beginning to end once again. Number 3 is probably something you may not think of, but it's the series finale of Fraggle Rock. Now, I am a Jim Henson freak. I love the Muppets. Sesame Street was my early childhood, and I love the Muppet movies and all the other stuff that Jim Henson has given us through the years, but Fraggle Rock was a show that I never really got around to seeing because I didn't have HBO when I was a kid. I couldn't watch TV on Saturday because of religious reasons, so thank goodness I met a woman who is now my wife that is a massive Fraggle Rock fan, and we actually watched a whole bunch of episodes of Fraggle Rock. I still need to see them all, but we now officially have the complete series on DVD, and I'm really excited to watch the series from beginning to end because it really is charming, and I also love the fact that it really introduces us to the whole second generation of Muppeteers that basically inherited the wonderful things that Jim Henson and Frank Oz gave us, and we had all these brand new guys that are now legends in the world of Muppeteering, and it was such a charming show, but that ending was so heartfelt, it was so beautiful, so meaningful. I never would have expected to see a series finale like that from a show like Fraggle Rock. Even though I know that when it comes to the Muppets, there's so much emotion in this work, it was something that shattered my expectations. It was so beautiful, and it even made me cry a little bit. I'm really excited to watch this show from beginning to end and actually watch that series finale because it was sad, it was happy, it was exciting, it was tense. What a great way to end a show like Fraggle Rock, I gotta admit that. Number 2 is one of the most legendary series finales of all time, and these days I compare it to The Big Bang Theory because I now call the series finale of The Big Bang Theory the Cheers series finale of my generation, and that means number 2 is the series finale of Cheers. Cheers is one of the most beloved shows that NBC and network television ever gave us. I didn't watch it because I was too young. I could have watched the last 2 seasons if I wanted to, but I chose not to, but I was lucky enough to find it on Netflix, and I binge-watched the whole series, and then I finally even binge-watched Frasier, which was another great show, and also one of the greatest spin-offs of all time. But Cheers was such a fun, innocent show, just Seeing Sam Malone take this bar and just have his patrons become great friends, a family, and just encounter all of life's crazy problems, and also just to listen to these people's problems and give them advice. Such great characters like Cliff Clavin, Carla, and of course the great Norm Peterson, played by George Wendt. And George Wendt gives us that great moment at the very end of the last episode where Sam has just been struggling to find his meaning in life, and he really doesn't think that Cheers is the way that his life is supposed to be. He always felt that he was there for bigger and better things, and he tries to strive for those bigger and better things. But he comes back to Cheers, and the last customer of that night is Norm, and Norm just has this long heart-to-heart talk with Sam, and he just says to him, "You will never turn your back on your one true love. You will always come back to her." And Sam finally understands what he's been doing for all these years, and he finally realizes where he belongs, and he finally realizes his purpose, and he just says, "I'm the luckiest son of a bitch alive," and that's the way the show ends. It also was a great way to show you that it doesn't necessarily mean that the story is over, because the last moment of the episode just says life is going to move on, Cheers is going to open tomorrow, and everybody's going to come back to that bar and have a good time tomorrow. And that's one of the few things I liked about that series finale, because it shows you that life is never over. Things just keep continuing. The story always moves on, and the next chapter is just as unpredictable as the one we just finished. And that leaves us to the final series finale that I think is probably one of the greatest, and if it didn't hit me as hard as it did, it probably wouldn't have been number one. But it's the series finale of Boy Meets World. Ironically, I've got Fred Savage and his younger brother Ben Savage in this countdown. How cool is that? But the series finale is really not the greatest thing throughout, because it really is a clips episode, just showing you where Corey, Sean, Topanga, Mr. Feeney, how everybody just lived their lives in the last 7 years and where they are right now. But it's that last couple of minutes that just seals it all and puts a nice little bow on this fun, entertaining family package. Topanga, Eric, Sean, and Corey go back to the original classroom that Sean and Corey were in the very first season of Boy Meets World to meet up with Mr. Feeney and ask him, "Do you have anything left to teach us?" And they all just tell him what an impactful person he was, even though they had butted heads with him, never agreed with him, constantly hated the fact that he was always breathing down their neck. They showed him their gratitude and showed him that he was such an impactful person in their lives and that they are better for it. And at the very end, when they all leave the classroom, Mr. Feeney is just standing and looking around at those empty desks and looks up at the door and says, "I love you all." It was just one of the most beautiful things I ever saw. The atmosphere, the score that's used, it's so emotional and beautiful. I've never experienced a series finale like Boy Meets World, and it was just such a great way to end that show, even though the last episode ended up just being a clips episode until that point in time, with a couple of other present moments thrown in here and there. But that's why that show was so wonderful, and one of the best series finales, at least for me, the best that I've ever seen. So that's it, everybody. Those are my 10 favorite series finales. I want to thank Melissa for coming to join me at the last minute. Really excited to hear what your final 10 episodes that you consider the best ones are. So excited to hear what you have to say, because it's a blind box as usual. But thank you very much for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed. Please leave your comments in the box below and tell me what your favorite series finales are. They don't necessarily have to be 10, but I would like to hear what you think some of the best ones are. And I will see you in the next one. Hey, thank you so much for stopping by my channel today. If you're new here and want to see more of what my channel has to offer, please click on the link to my last video, or hit that subscribe button to be kept up to date with all of my uploads. Content of all sorts is posted here quite often, so trust me, you do not want to fall behind. I will see you in the comments, and actions speak louder than words.